Hello everyone, Esper here. Welcome back to my video series on drawing fantasy maps. This is part 2 in which I'm going to get into mountains and hills. So the feature that I like to do after creating the basic shape of the landmass is to put in the mountains and hills. This is because they're big, tall, blocky, rocky shapes, and oftentimes the lay of your land is going to flow around the mountains. After all, we are talking about elevation here. So I've got a second piece of just kind of scratch paper, and I'm going to show some ways in which mountains can be done. So some people like to draw mountains completely bird's eye view. So you're looking at them totally top down. It starts by drawing this main ridge line in the middle, then these branching lines from the side. Then you go and you put in your other details, textures, shadowing. This is an effective way of doing mountains, but it's not the technique that I prefer. The reasons that I do not prefer it are because, well, really there's two. One is because it doesn't really give me that classic fantasy map feeling. You know, I grew up reading books like Lord of the Rings, and I like that classic, essentially 2D or 2.5D look where you're looking at them from the side. The other reason that I don't particularly care for this style is because it's more complicated. I have found that sometimes when I finish my result, it just doesn't really look like mountains. It's not, I don't think it's quite so effective at consistently getting that mountain effect. And I like things that I can be efficient with. You know, I have consistent results and it looks good. It looks like the object that I'm trying to draw. But again, some people do like this style. They're effective at it. They can make it really look like mountains. Just not quite my cup of tea. So let's look at doing this classic side view or maybe 3/4 view mountain. So the most basic way to look at this shape is something like this. Now, as I was mentioning in the last video about the balance between tight and loose hand control, this is like a very tight hand control here. The lines are simple, and really when you think about it, this turns out looking like pyramids. So it doesn't look bad, but we don't want our mountains to just look like basic pyramids. Here's another way to do this very simple straight line style. Now let's put some snowy caps at the top. There, it's going to look less like a pyramid now. So yeah, it looks more like mountains now, but it's very simple. It's a very, very simple effect, and it just, I don't know, it looks like a very simple cartoon mountain. So what you need to do is allow the line to wiggle a little bit. Play back and forth between tight and loose control, and let it just kind of go as such. And see, already it looks more organic. Here's a larger version. I'm drawing it larger so you can really see the effect of what I'm talking about. So literally I'm just letting my hand go from a strong grip to a more lighter, wobbly grip. Now let's talk about the shading. So like I said before, you want 2 layers on everything. So that was the first layer, is the basic line. Here's a way to do the second layer. You just draw a line down the middle, and then you put shading in. So that looks good. Yeah, that really looks pretty good. However, that is still not quite my preferred way of doing the mountains. That comes out looking very stylized, and it's not quite the style that I'm doing my map in. But what I'm going to do is something a little bit similar. So I'm going to start again with this, layer 1, the basic outline. Let it get with an organic look. Then I'm just going to draw from the side. See how I'm just going to shade it in from the side as such. And you can put the shading lines in different directions. You can see, or you will see, how I'm angling the direction of the shading. It's not always this consistent direction or consistent angle with the shading lines. See how I let it kind of arc a little bit, and I let it kind of flow in different ways. See how I'm angling it in different directions. Some people do like to draw their maps out in pencil first and then go back over it with pen. I prefer just to go straight into pen. I've practiced it enough to where I don't need to put in pencil outlines first. And also that saves me a lot of time. That saves me a whole step. So I like things that are fast, that are efficient. And if you can, I encourage you to practice just making it in pen. That way you get used to it, you get good at it. You're not scared of just drawing in permanent, the permanent ink, and you can just go straight in with pen and just let it flow and not have to draw everything twice. So let's go back to the actual map. Let's put in some mountains. I'm going to put them in the north. I know that's a bit generic, but so be it. Who knows? Actually, this is not showing the entire realm here. You can't actually see this entire kingdom. So maybe this isn't the north. Maybe this is the south. Okay, so first we put in the initial layer, which is just the basic line work. You can decide how closely or far apart you want your mountains spaced. The density is really up to you, what you prefer, how much work do you want to put into this, or even what do you think this region should be like. Maybe the region has very dense mountains. So I'm putting these in. I should mention here that I've got a second piece of paper underneath. So what that's going to allow me to do is when I need, I can pull the top layer away just slightly, and I can go off the edge and not be writing on my table. And sometimes you want to go off the edge. In these region maps, you're going to be going off the edge because it's a zoom in or a close-up as a certain region. Now, most mountains don't just end with straight ground. Most mountains have some sort of foothills or other variance in the elevation around them. So I often like putting hills near the mountains. And you'll see also in some later videos, I like to use terrain elements to, how can I say this? Maybe to couch other elements, to bring them in, to tie them in with the map. Imagine you just have straight plains and then you have these mountains. Well, when you put the hills in, it's like you're attaching the mountains to the plains. And I do this with other terrain features as well. I do it with, lakes and forests, and you can use little in-between smaller details to attach or to house the bigger details. Now I'm going in and doing the second layer. Again, that second layer with the details and shading is really what makes it pop, what brings it to life, what sets it apart from a very basic and simple looking map to something that is dynamic. So I'm just using that effect that I showed before, where I'm doing this shading and kind of texturing, and I'm letting it go from different angles. There's a basic angle there from the side that I think is the most it's kind of the baseline, but I let it vary from there, and sometimes I will do it from a counterposing direction. And again, that control between tight and loose. In fact, with these shadings of mountains, hills, and rocky areas, I like it to be a little looser. Yeah, when you let it get loose, you start to get all these little variations, and it looks more organic that way. Hills, sometimes they're not big enough to allow very much shading. So sometimes really all you need is just a second little line on the side there. So I'm going to continue working on these mountains, filling in, putting the shading, and once it gets done, it's going to look pretty good. You know, if you look at that, it doesn't look like those started with just little basic lines, but it did. So again, I hope this was helpful for you. I hope it gave you some insight, and most of all, I hope this improves your own map making for your games at home or whatever the project is that you're working on. So thanks again, everybody, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video, which I'm going to show forests.